everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here today to film a recent reads video. So I think this is the first recent reads video I've done in January, but I don't have very many books to talk about, strangely enough, and that has to do with the fact that I'm reading several very chunky books as buddy reads this month. I'm hoping to finish up most of those by the end of January. Please note that is my cat up on the windowsill. So if you see paws or tails poking down, that's what that is. Weird. Some big chunky books. So hope to finish those up by the end of January. But these are four books that I finished and one DNF to talk about today. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is this short piece of nonfiction. This is A Short History of U.S. Interventions in Latin America and the Caribbean by Alan McPherson. This is set up in a series of articles, and each article is, thoroughly annotated with a bibliography like that. And this goes just through exactly what it says on the tin, how and when and why the U.S. intervened in Caribbean and Latin American nations from the formation of our country through, modern history, 1900s, but mostly focusing on like 1800s and on. So let me just read you off a couple of the, so there's one about Cuba. These all sort of bleed into one another, but there's one that is centrally focused on Cuba. There's one that's centrally focused on Puerto Rico. There's one about Panama and its Central American Isthmus and the U.S. attempts to build a canal. There's a lot in here about just sort of generalized interventions with Mexico because we intervened in Mexico like multiple times. And this is a really good basis for understanding sort of our current day issues with Latin American countries and Caribbean countries, how we got to situations with places like Puerto Rico that are territories of the U.S., how our relationship with Cuba has been over, 100-year period, all this kind of stuff. I think this is a really excellent basis for further reading. So this didn't do everything that I wanted it to. It's very academic. It's very sort of fact-based. There's a lot of names, a lot of dates. So this didn't read, smoothly like narrative nonfiction at all, but it gave me a good basis, in fact, for further reading, which I am already currently embarked on. So if you need a place to start in learning about how the U.S. has intervened in Latin America and the Caribbean, I definitely recommend this one. Then I finished another nonfiction, and that is A Lab of One's Own, One Woman's Personal Journey Through Sexism in Science by Rita, Colwell, and Sharon Birch McGrain. So Rita Colwell was the first woman to become the head of the National Science Foundation, and this tells her life story and also details how difficult it's been for women to advance in the sciences. So Rita Colwell is, I believe, in her 80s at this point, and so when she got started in the 50s in the U.S. trying to get her education, it was extremely difficult for women to get, first of all, to even go to college, to have careers in the sciences. There were barriers not only culturally with women's expectations as far as home and family, but also structural barriers within the schools of just simply not believing that women could do science. She had a difficult time finding an advisor to do her PhD because older professors did not want to take on women. In fact, some just simply wouldn't take on women. And even people that she had as mentors, men that were her mentors, later on, after she'd worked with them for years, would tell her to her face that women couldn't do science after she'd been doing that for decades. It was so incredibly frustrating to read this book. But Rita Colwell persevered. And in the midst of telling her own story about how she overcame barriers to her career in the sciences, she also weaves in stories of other women who were doing amazing things in the sciences and the barriers they overcame and the challenges they faced and conquered. this book made me angry in so many places. First of all, I should say that I buddy read this with Britta Bowler, and she and I had a great time discussing this book. There's so much in here to talk about in terms of equality between the sexes, about sciences, about how women are excluded and held down and their work isn't valued, how women are still expected to shoulder the majority of the workload when it comes to family life, all this stuff. And interspersed with all that are like these facts that will come out at you and you'll just be like, really? Like, I graduated with my undergraduate degree in science, in the sciences, in 1995. In 1998, women were still not allowed to be on U.S. submarines for the U.S. Navy while they were underway, while they were on a mission. So women were only allowed on the submarines to clean them when they were in port, or for like fixing things when they were in port. If the submarine was underway on a mission, women were not allowed to be in there. So this woman, I don't remember the woman's name, who needed to do research science under the ice in the Arctic and needed to be on a submarine to do that work, had to be flown to meet the submarine in the Arctic from the United States because she couldn't ride on the submarine as it left port in the U.S. on its way to the Arctic in 1998. Yes, I just can't get going because if I do, I will rant and I will rave. So this was a great book. Super fascinating. If you're interested in women in science in any way, if you liked Lab Girl, if that's the kind of science nonfiction that you're into, I highly recommend this. I will say this is not beautifully written. This is very sort of straightforward, straight ahead prose. So, you know, just go into it knowing that. I didn't have any problem with it, but it's not going to like blow you away with its literary quality. Also, I didn't agree with Rita Colwell in every aspect of her ideas about how women should proceed in terms of having a career in the sciences. I think that there's a generational gap between she and I about what women should and should not settle for. And I am much more apt to be outspoken about what I think women deserve and what they need. And I think women need to speak out about what they need and not be so willing to just accept being poorly treated, excuse me. So she and I differed in a few respects that way, but I still think her career has been amazing. She has done tremendous amounts of things to further the careers of women in the sciences and also to further science because she discovered some really important things about cholera. Yeah, fascinating book. Highly recommend. I then finished the next book in the Bridgerton series for my reread with my romance reading buddies, Katie and Doris. This is When He Was Wicked. This is book 6 in the Bridgerton series, and this book is about Michael and Francesca. Francesca is the one Bridgerton who we basically don't know anything about at this point when book 6 starts. She has been married off to a Scottish earl. Like, we hear about her, but we never really see her on the page very much in the other 5 books. And in this book, it's not a spoiler to say that her husband of only 2 years dies unexpectedly, like in the first opening chapters. And then it's all about her relationship with her dead husband's brother, who is the new earl. So it's one of these things where Michael and Francesca have been friends for many years, but he has been in love with her since he met her. And how do they navigate that relationship of one person having been in love with the other for a long time, but hiding it, and the other person like just not seeing him in that way until suddenly she does. Delightful. I had forgotten how much I enjoyed this book. I had forgotten how much the romance touched me, and I just really, really enjoyed this one. The next book is a DNF for me, and that is a book that was on the 6 that I picked off of these 2 shelves here in my TBR to sort of see if I like or not. This is A Moose and a Lobster Walk into a Bar by John MacDonald. This is a humorous, I don't know how this is described. It's a book of humor, I guess. He is a main humorist and a storyteller. He used to write a weekly newspaper column, and I think a lot of these are columns that were in the newspaper. This book was first published in 2002, so these were columns like from many years before that. This is a very well-known Maine book if you live in Maine. As one of my viewers pointed out in the comments, like she thought probably everybody who lives in Maine has a copy of this book somewhere, and I think that's probably right. But I read the first 50 pages and said, nope, not for me. This book is very stereotypical about Maine people. It also is very derogatory towards liberals, Democrats, people with college educations, pretty much everybody that is not conservative and Republican. And I just, at the time, was like, no, not gonna do it. So I DNF'd it, and I'm not sorry. And then last but not least, I read Mouse. This is book 1 in a graphic memoir series. This is A Survivor's Tale, My Father Bleeds History by Art Spiegelman. Everybody knows about Mouse. This is probably the most well-known graphic memoir in the world at this point. This is all about Art Spiegelman telling the story of his father, who was a Jew in Germany during World War I, and he and his mother, Art Spiegelman's mother, his parents were sent to concentration camp. So this book, the first book, tells about how his parents meet. So I should back up here and say this book is told. Art Spiegelman is trying to get his father to tell him his life story and to write this book. So there's tension between Art Spiegelman and his father. They have a very contentious relationship. Art Spiegelman is really upset with his father about past things that have happened. And so that sort of meta narrative is happening as the framework for this story. And then we get these flashbacks of his father telling his story of what happens, how he met Art Spiegelman's mother, what happened at the beginning of the war, how different events impacted he and his wife throughout the war, the horrible hardships and deprivations that they were forced to endure in trying to get away from the Nazis and then being captured and sent to, this book ends as they're captured and being sent to the concentration camp. I will tell you this is extremely emotionally powerful. The artwork is just all black and white like this. The Jews are drawn as mice and the Nazis are drawn as cats. And it is just harrowing, absolutely harrowing. I will give you a tip from me to you. Do not read this in the evening before bed. I did that. I read this entire book in one sitting, one evening before I went to bed, and then I had nightmares all night long, and it was awful. So when I read book 2, I'm going to read it in the morning on a bright sunny day, because it is so emotionally powerful and so harrowing and so horrible what these people went through, what they were forced to endure. And it's just so detail rich as well. The way that it's told, the way Mr. Spiegelman is telling this story to his son, it is so difficult to read. It's not difficult to read in that it reads really easily, like physically and like the words and all that, but like emotionally, it's so emotionally difficult to read. But yet it is extremely powerful and well done. And I can see why it's won all kinds of awards and everybody still talks about it. That's what I've read so far that I haven't yet talked about in the month of January. Like I said, I have many books on the go. I'm hoping to finish up some of those books in the coming week. Today is Sunday, January 24th, so I'm hoping that by January 31st, I'll have completed a bunch more books so that I can start February fresh, because, the BookTube Prize long list is about to be released tomorrow. I'm super excited for that. I hope you've all been getting some good reading done, finding some great books, and I will talk to you later.